Hey everyone, Reed here with Big Strong Book, author of Chorus of 1,000, now available on Amazon. And today we are talking about Dark Apprentice by Kevin J. Anderson, the second book of the Jedi Academy trilogy. So, as my video from yesterday going over Jedi Search, the first book in the trilogy, it was pretty obvious from that video, I was not that much of a fan of the first book. The good news is that this book improves on the first book, if only a little bit. It has more of an interesting plot, interesting character development, things that the first book was lacking some of. But there are still, I think, a lot of fundamental issues with this, but good to see that this is an improvement and certainly not a decline from the first book. I would have been much more apprehensive, maybe pushing back a little bit at the idea of finishing out the trilogy had this kind of gone down. But from my take of reading this and in a few short sessions today, it was definitely better. So we'll start with some of the positives. One, Leia has something to do. She, even though her plot is ultimately kind of a lot of it, I think a lot of so that I know I'm trying to talk about positives to start. So, she has at least more to do. She had nothing to do in the first book. So she has something to do with kind of her plot that is synced up, interestingly enough, with Admiral Akbar. He figures more into this. We get to see a little more introspective Akbar than at least I'm accustomed to. That's the thing when you get these novels that can have a little more space to breathe, obviously, than a 2-hour movie can. You get a lot of side characters, maybe not insanely developed, but you get characters like Akbar, like Wedge Antilles, I know has definitely a much broader role in the books, but you can have a chance. I mean, the Star Wars universe, in particularly the characters leading out of the original trilogy, there's a ton of characters, a ton of opportunity to explore a lot of things, and so we saw an interesting side of Admiral Akbar. Akbar was probably one of the most interesting characters in this book. So again, Leia has more to do in this, but in hindsight, it's maybe not enough. And then I think on the flip side, Han was the shining star. I mean, I'm not saying that I necessarily loved everything with Han's storyline in the first book, but in this, he's kind of in the Leia position of the last book, where he gets shafted. I don't even know what he really does in this. He just stews about his role in the New Republic, which is good. Again, it's interesting to see that kind of that uneasiness with his position in the state of things, but it's hinted at. You see that a little bit in some scenes, but there's not enough striking depth to it. It was just him kind of being like, oh, and then he plays a sabak game with Lando, and he loses the Millennium Falcon to him, and then he's like, oh, I want to rescue Leia. I can't go rescue Leia because I don't have the Millennium Falcon, so I'll just send somebody else to do it. And that to me is just so incompatible with his story, because that may have been something that the Han of A New Hope would have done, but as we saw in A New Hope, spoilers for episode 4 if you're one of the 3 people who have not seen it, he is rewarded handsomely at the end of or leading into the final act of A New Hope. He has saved the princess, and so he gets handsomely rewarded for it, and he's like, see you guys, I'm out of here. I have no allegiance to anybody. I have no loyalty to anybody. And then he has that conversation with Luke, and he's like, no, I think I'm gonna head off. And then of course, then he comes in to get the TIE fighters off of Luke's back that allows him to destroy the Death Star. So then he comes to his senses. He's the honorable scoundrel of sorts. He's the man who, at the end of the day, has great honor, great loyalty. So it was very weird. Ultimately, Leia gets into a situation where Han says, okay, I'll go to her rescue. But then she's fine by the time he gets to her. And so it's like, great, his heart was in the right place ultimately, but did it really have the impact that it could have? I don't know. Then the stuff with Luke finally getting his Jedi Academy starting, the ball started to roll very slowly in the first book, and now we finally got him kind of coming into that in this one. And it's fine. The more interesting things happened with the apprentices. I don't even know if the term Padawan learner is used in this. It's not. I don't think it's used. But of course, since that's the terminology that we know of, getting the full picture of the Saga of 6, I'll call them Padawan learners. The interesting things happen with the Padawan learners, not so with Luke. Luke is kind of having to react. I mean, I guess it makes sense because now he's a teacher in this, and so he's reacting to the missteps and the tragic missteps in some cases of his Padawan learners in this. Not enough. Luke comes across as a little feckless, a little bit. He's holding him back a little too much. And maybe that trepidation is there because he's new to the role of teacher, at least teaching on this kind of it's not just him teaching Leia, it's him teaching a whole bunch of strangers. So maybe he holds back a little bit, or maybe that's just because of, I don't know if it's a Jedi code for if somebody starts to do things that are very radical, very dangerous, to just kind of step back and let them fall into a path rather than pulling them out of it. Maybe that's why Luke did or did not do certain things at certain points in the book, without getting too much into spoilers for now. I was like, some things just, it doesn't seem like something he would do. But I want to understand why he was holding back. Maybe it was a Jedi code thing, that, and a code of honor, that he just wanted somebody to choose for themselves rather than pulling somebody back in. Maybe that was a line that he was not willing to walk. So whatever with that. Other storylines. Oh my God, the 3PO as babysitter. There's always a character that's relegated to being the babysitter. 3PO and Leia were kind of Leia just being a mom to her kids, and that was kind of her full focus in the first book, and now that kind of gets shifted to 3PO, and 3PO and Chewbacca are the babysitters in this. And I don't know, the kind of feckless, ineffectual qualities. There's, and then Dala, Admiral Dala, who's set up to be pretty interesting, a complex character. I feel like she's barely in this. She's barely in this when she is, at least as it's made clear throughout the course of Dark Apprentice, she's not the ultimate antagonist of this trilogy, but even as a secondary antagonist, I feel like she still needs to be very much so a significant presence, but she's not until the end, and then Kip. The character of Kip, probably the one who has the most radical changes to his character throughout the novel. I'm mixed on Kip's story. again, he came across, and I think I mentioned this in my review of Jedi Search, he was probably one of the most interesting characters of that book, at least in terms of the interesting characters newly introduced, new to the Star Wars universe. But he goes so heavily into one direction. I can understand why that Anderson, kind of in writing the character of Kip, spends a long time trying to justify the decisions that Kip is making. Kip is trying to justify to himself, it seems, why he's going down this path. And while I can understand why, essentially why Anderson through Kip is trying to justify why he is doing something, it feels so radical. It feels so much of a whoosh in one direction to then hurt people, to then do all of these things. And then the powers he exhibits, not necessarily the powers that he exhibits at the way end of the book, but some force powers, seems so Mary Sue, to the point that it puts even all the arguments about Rey in the Disney movies to shame. Like, Rey is made, like, the stuff that Rey does is on borderline more understandable in those movies than Kip does within this one book, where he goes from just starting out and kind of having a good time and being like, yeah, I'm so into it, to, I'll now get into spoilers here. He goes from like being a hip and eager Jedi apprentice to then raising a ship out of a gas giant onto a whole other planet. What? Like, Luke hasn't even shown these powers in the books yet. And as I understand it, it's the argument that Luke has the power essentially to, like, destroy or cripple a Star Destroyer. And of course, some of that is he holding back? Does he have the knowledge? Does he have the capability of doing it? And it's just a personal choice not to do that. But it's just that Kip so quickly, I get that he just takes in the Sith influence. He takes it in so completely. But I mean, come on, like a Sith spirit or Sith force ghost or whatever Exar Kun is, acting through somebody who, while they might have tinkered and done some things with the Force, to then raise a ship out of a gas giant to another planet. That's just a very big leap in logic. As the things that happened to Gantoris, who was killed in this book, just out of nowhere. I thought that we would have seen. I was pretty disappointed by that. I was disappointed to see like nothing come of that. Absolutely nothing come of that character. And that one still, that was like an almost shocking, with taking in the dark. He seemed resistant to it. Ultimately, he was resistant to the, no pun intended, to the force of Exar Kun, that he was kind of trying to influence him. But and that's kind of incompatible with this character who's so afraid of this so-called dark presence in the first book, to then let him in completely to build this insanely overpowered lightsaber to then try to battle Luke, and then to back off and be like, okay, maybe I was a little too headstrong and crazy with that, to then all of a sudden he tries to battle the dark spirit and then is killed. And then that's it. And I think, I don't remember exactly, like, two things with the Dala, Admiral Dala and her force going to Dantooine and kind of eliminating Gantoris's people who were at the end of the first book where they were brought to Dantooine as kind of a new safe haven. I think I might be incorrect in trying to remember the sequencing of events, but with Gantoris, he might be killed before Dala's attack on Dantooine. Isn't that a great So if I might flip through it here just to see for sure that I get the sequencing of events correct. Because I think it was okay. I think it was after. I think it was after. So, but I don't recall there being this great moment of where there's this change within him. I don't know. It seemed incompatible to me. So missed opportunity there. And just with everything with Kip to then so lifting the Sun Crusher out of Yavin and then piloting it all the way to where it was what Ixar Kun just told him where the Imperial fleet was. He didn't even use the Force or anything. He just Kun told him, go here, go to this nebula cluster. They'll be here. Then using the Sun Crusher to then start the supernova, which I'm fine with. I'm glad that we at least, the Chekhov's gun of the Sun Crusher, I think it probably, for its effectiveness in kind of launching this story, it probably should have been used in some capacity in the first book. So be it, we got it at the end of this book. And then it conveniently only destroys one of the TIE fighters, one of the Star Destroyers, just as Dala, I assume, gets away in her Star Destroyer. That's kind of left off, but he's not. Kip is not able to see if she gets away, and I'm pretty sure he survives it too. So it's like, okay, with Kip, obviously, I feel like this is going down the path that we see so many like good characters, characters that fall to the dark side and then come back. We always see them come back. We have a Vader-esque sacrifice and turn back to the good, the redemption, but then they always die. I'm trying to remember a time where we get a character that goes from the light side to the dark side of the Force, then is able to redeem themselves, but then they survive, and then they can grow from that, and maybe there's still some conflict within them where they're able to try to bridge the two disparate sides that are at play in their mind and then fuse them together. But we don't. I'm trying to remember a time where we can see the redemption and then they live. So I hope that Kip survives. I hope that we can get maybe whether or not he grows and becomes more ingrained in the Sith and then kind of goes off on his own path, an adversary potentially for a later day. That's an angle, but I feel like the most, probably the given how obvious a lot of things in the story have been, unfortunately, how things have been telegraphed, it seems like he will be redeemed, but he will die in the process. He will die a hero's death in the process. That's what I hope it's not, because I don't know. I want a chance to explore this character, a character who started to do some heinous things and can get pulled back and then be rehabilitated a little bit. I want to see that again. But so Admiral Akbar stuff, that was part of the most intriguing thing. But again, the whole the shipyards on Calamari, that whole subplot, I'm like, man, it's just it might be too little too late with that. It's just Leia has something to do. She kind of helps Akbar out, and then Akbar saves the day, great, but then Akbar's like, no, I'm stepping away. The stuff with Mon Mothma is kind of interesting, with the influence of the rogue Calamari agent who's kind of sabotaging everything, and it is implied kind of poisoned Mon Mothma for her to kind of be in the state. And so Leia has to rise to the fore which I'm okay with. It's like, okay, now we finally get to see that in this book. It's just, yeah, she has something to do, but is it impactful enough into the story? I don't know. Akbar stepping out of it is interesting. I don't know if this is the last time we see him. I doubt it. Again, I doubt it. The characters aren't out. They're not down and out of the count for good. And yeah, Han, by extension, Lando, very disappointing in this. Wanted to see more. Mara Jade, she shows up for a second. What does she have? What does she add to this? Not really much of consequence. Not really much. And so, so many of these great characters, Leia, Han, great potential, but it's like they're either acting in weird ways, acting slightly out of what we know about who they are and who their characters are, without organic. In Kip's case, it just seems such a quick turn so fast without building to it. I get that you need a character by design of how a Jedi Academy story is set up. You need the conflict of one of the apprentices turning to the dark side. I get that that's the design of this. You need that to happen, but it's just, a lot of these characters are just, they're not utilized. They're not being utilized to their full potential. Who knows? For all I know, Anderson is saving that for Champions of the Force, the final book in the trilogy. We'll get to that soon. We'll see, if we're able to see kind of finally all these characters acting at full capacity, at full throttle. But if they haven't already, I kind of doubt that they will in the end. But we'll see what happens. I'm a little optimistic. So it's about all I have to say for Dark Apprentice. If you have read it, let me know what you think. And as always, I will see you guys next time.